Reet, over to you.
Thank you so much. Namaste and greetings. I, Reetlath, researcher at IMPRI. Namaste and greetings. I, Reetlath, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI Web Policy Talk. We are gathered today for a panel discussion on New India's economic transformation and interim budget, union budget 2024 to 2025. As a part of IMPRI, fourth annual series of thematic deliberations and analysis of interim budget 2024 to 2025. This discussion is organized by Center for the Study of Finance and Economics, IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi, as a part of IMPRI Web Policy Talk series. I welcome you all to this enlightening deliberation and thank you for tuning in to this discussion. I am now honored to present the introduction of this distinguished gathering. Our chair for the session is Professor Mukul Asharji, visiting Distinguished Professor IMPRI, former Professor Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, National University of Singapore in US. This program has an excellent panel of experts who will be sharing their expertise for the duration of this discussion, which includes Professor A. Amartya Reddy Ji, Joint Director, Policy Support Research, Indian Council of Agricultural Research, and Visiting Senior Fellow, IMPRI. Dr. Radhika Pandey Ji, Senior Fellow, National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, New Delhi, and Visiting Senior Fellow, IMPRI. Professor Prabir Deji, Professor, Research and Information System for Developing Countries, New Delhi, and Mr. Subhamir Chatterjee Bhattacharya Ji, Consulting Editor at the Business Standard. We welcome everyone, and we eagerly look forward to the opportunity to gain insights and knowledge from our esteemed assembly. Now, without any further ado, let's start the program. It is my honor and privilege to invite Professor Mukul Asharji to start the program with the chair's opening remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Reed. Pranam, namaskar. Let me begin by congratulating and thanking IMPRI director and his team for providing on a continuous basis high quality public good in terms of the various topical seminars and policy issues. The energy and the reach of IMPRI is truly impressive, and I'm very proud to be associated with IMPRI. We are here to talk about the 2024-25 interim budget. We know what the sequence will be. Dr. Pandey will be followed by Professor Reddy, then Professor Dev, and finally Mr. Bhattacharya. Let me first make some preliminary remarks. In my view, the 2024-25 budget is a very constructive step towards Viksit Bharat. And the Viksit Bharat, the way it has been defined in the budget, is the prosperous Bharat in harmony with nature. So environmental trade-offs have to be made with modern infrastructure showing up in CapEx and others, and providing opportunities for all citizens and to all regions to reach their potential. So this is moving from the entitlement to empowerment and broad-basing economic growth with lot of growth nodes. So you empower people to grow. Now, the budget, while it is usually the focus of discussion, is should not be regarded as the only instrument for economic policies. These are done throughout the budget. And one of the more significant example of outside the budget initiative or policy measure is the appointment of the 16th Finance Commission under the chairmanship of Professor Panagaria, the former vice chairman of Niti Aayog. And Finance Commission's 15th Finance Commission had a lot of impact on public finances, both of the center, the states, and urban and local bodies. And the 16th Finance Commission, the work is going to be watched very closely. The membership is very well chosen, and we can expect some positive outcomes from that. Now, what are the key characteristics terms we can use to describe the budget? I would use one, prudent economic and fiscal management. In spite of the high capex expenditure, others, and this is essential in today's globalized economy is being weaponized. So any country, particularly rising India, that does not have prudent macro and fiscal policies will find itself challenged. The budget projects the nominal GDP in 2024-25 at 327.7 trillion INR, which is at 83 rupees, is 3.95 trillion USD, close to 4 trillion. At using the 72 rules, take 72, divide by the growth rate, the nominal growth rate is 10.5. So the GDP could double in 6.86 years. So we can expect around 8 trillion in about 7 years from now. It is not automatic. A lot of challenges remain. I'll mention some of those. IMF has already indicated that in 24, 25, 25, 26, India will grow in real terms. Nominal is real plus inflation. In real terms at 6.5%. And it will be the largest, fastest growing large economy. So there are a lot of examples of that group, the prudential part, but Dr. Pandey will elaborate on that. Second is the future orientation. The 1 trillion rupee innovation fund is a good example of that. And the third is the broad-based development initiative announcing household welfare. The rooftop solarization, the increasing Lakpati Didi goal from 20 to 30 million are examples of that. But the government points out there was no economic survey because it's an interim budget in an election year. Full budget will be in July. That's when economic survey will be presented. So what are the challenges? One, the potential disruptive impact of AI, artificial intelligence on livelihood. It is also a risk globally. Then the ensuring that talent and appropriately skilled and healthy workforce is available in the face of collapsing global fertility, as well as India moving at different speeds towards below replacement rate fertility. Our fertility is already below replacement rate, but different states have different rates. Finally, there is also, we mentioned, global development could adversely affect us. And finally, changing mindset and developing appropriate national character of the people for growth. Just if you permit me one more minute. I had the privilege of being in South Korea, in Seoul, in 1977. I was doing some research on MNCs in Korea. And whole city was just one construction site. And it was the only country where the Ministry of Finance officials asked me and gave me an appointment to come at 8 p.m. They were working. And 8 p.m. they saw me and talked to me for an hour in a nice way. So it was very impressive. The national character was, we want to develop. They had, of course, North Korea and they had Japan, the two that were pushing them to grow. Now, national character that is consistent with Viksit Bharat. And we all know we have some way to go, but I think we need to work on it. Thank you very much. And now may I request Dr. Pandey to make her presentation.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, sir, for setting such a wonderful tone for our panel discussion. And thank you so much for sharing such great insights. Now, I'm delighted to call upon Radhika Pandey ji to further expand our knowledge on this topic.
Thank you. So I will be talking about mainly the fiscal arithmetic behind the interim budget. So next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Ma'am, you
Yes.
can see the screen, right? You can see the screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay, please go ahead.
So the overarching theme of the interim budget is fiscal consolidation. So if we look around the various announcements that have been made, one of the overarching theme is fiscal consolidation, and that is visible through an aggressive fiscal deficit target for the next financial year. So we have seen that the fiscal deficit target has been fixed at 5.1% of GDP for the next financial year. This is important because the finance ministry, the government has always been reiterating that the medium-term goalpost of fiscal deficit is 4.5% of GDP by FY26, that is next to next year. So there were concerns that, from 5.9% to 4.5%, it's a big change. It is 140 basis points, but we have seen that the government has walked the talk on that, and the target for the next financial year is kept at 5.1% of GDP. And if that can be achieved, then for the next financial year, for the next to next financial year, that is FY26, the 4.5% target would be achievable. Now, even for this financial year, the government has done better in terms of its fiscal deficit target. The target was 5.9% as per the budget, but the revised estimate suggests that the fiscal deficit is 5.8% of GDP. Now, we think that, the government could even do better in terms of its fiscal deficit target for this financial year, particularly because if we look at the numbers that are released every month from the Controller General of Accounts data, it shows that there has been some, slackness in spending. Particularly if you see capital expenditure, still a lot of spending has to be done. So we do think that there would be savings on spendings, and therefore fiscal deficit could be even lower than 5.8% of GDP for the current financial year. Now, why this is important? Why this is important to stick to fiscal consolidation roadmap? One is because our debt to GDP ratio continues to remain elevated. That is very amongst the peer economies, our debt to GDP ratio is quite high. And even if we look at the glide path of how it is expected to decline, we can see the IMF's World Economic Outlook glide path on debt to GDP ratio reduction. We see that it's going to fall very gradually. So, a way to make it fall steeply is to bring about a deeper reduction in fiscal deficits. So therefore, to that extent, this is a laudable move. The other is also because we know that Indian sovereign bonds are going to be included in global bond indices. So now there will be a greater scrutiny of our fiscal framework because Indian bonds are going to be part of the global bond indices, namely the Morgan Stanley as well as the Bloomberg bond indices. So investors will be looking at our commitment to fiscal framework, commitment to our fiscal glide path, and then they will be investing in our bonds, investing in sovereign bonds. So when the fiscal framework is subjected to sharper scrutiny, it becomes all the more important to have a credible glide path towards fiscal consolidation. And that is what we have seen in this budget. Also, from the perspective of monetary policy, it is a good move because if fiscal deficit would have been higher, then the conduct of monetary policy becomes complicated. It is not easy to start cutting interest rates if the fiscal deficit remains elevated. So with fiscal deficit in control, the RBI can, focus on inflation targeting, and it can focus on determining its interest rate trajectory based on inflation, not so much worrying about the overshooting of fiscal deficit targets and its impact on the conduct of monetary policy. So because of these reasons, it was very important to stick to the fiscal consolidation glide path, and government has done well in sticking to that target. Next slide, please. Yeah, so that this is just to show you the central government liabilities, that they are still elevated. This is the number coming from the budget papers. And still, if we look at the central government liabilities as a percent to GDP, it's quite high. It is 56% of GDP. This is the central government liability profile, where we are taking the public debt and other liabilities. And if we sum them up, we get the overall liabilities of central government as a percent to GDP. If we look at the FRBM framework, we know that according to FRBM, the central government debt to GDP ratio should be 40%, the state's debt to GDP ratio should be 20%, and overall should be 60% of GDP. That's the general government debt. But here we are seeing that just the central government debt is quite elevated at 56% of GDP. So it's important to start cutting, it's important to have a fiscal consolidation roadmap to see a steeper reduction in the central government liabilities. Next slide, please. Yeah, so starting with what are the various deficit indicators. So if we look at the fiscal deficit for the budget estimate 23-24, the budget estimate was 5.9%. The revised estimate is 5.8%. And for the next financial year, budget estimate is kept at 5.1% of GDP. Even if we look at the revenue deficit, there is a very sharp reduction that is envisaged for revenue deficit reduction from 2.9 to 2.8% and further to 2% of GDP by the next financial year. So if we look at the various deficit indicators, we have seen that the government is envisaging deeper cuts in the deficit. Also, if we look at primary deficit, a big reduction is envisaged. Now, why is primary deficit important? Because it's a very important indicator for the purposes of debt sustainability. What is primary deficit? It is the deficit excluding the interest payments. So primary deficit is also envisaged to reduce sharply to almost 1.5% of GDP by FY25. So bottom line here is that all the deficit indicators are projected to decline steeply from the RE of the current financial year to the BE of the next financial year. Next slide, please. So now let's look deeper into the expenditure part. What's happening to expenditure? Next slide, please. So one of the bigger, from the expenditure side, the key takeaway is that the thrust on capital expenditure continues. We've seen that post-COVID, one of the development plans of this government has been to focus on capital expenditure to give a boost to growth in the economy, and that continues, albeit at a moderate pace. So for the current, in the current interim budget, the central government has projected that capex will grow at 11.11% over the budget estimate. In absolute terms, capital expenditure is estimated to be 11.11 lakh crore in the next financial year. But if we compare this with the RE, the revised estimate of the current financial year, the jump is 17%. Why is this so? Because in the current financial year, the revised estimate is lower than the budget estimate by roughly 50,000 crore. So the government expects that the entire 10 lakh crore that was budgeted for the current financial year would not be spent. So there will be some underspending, and therefore the growth over RE for the next financial year is likely to be 17%. If we look at which of the main sectors occupy the bigger chunk of this 11.11 lakh crore, we see that roads, railways, defense, and capex outlay to states. These are the four big categories accounting for the overall 11.11 lakh crore. Roads is getting 2.72 lakh crore, railways 2.5 lakh crore. We heard the finance minister's speech talking about the railway corridors, about the upgradation of bogies to Vande Bharat. So there is a lot of emphasis continuing to both roads and railways. Defense also gets 1.82 lakh crore, and transfer to states, which has been one of the expenditure, a part of the expenditures for boosting states' capital expenditure, is retained at rupees 1.3 lakh crore. This was the same amount was for this financial year also, and for the next financial year also, the amount is 1.3 lakh crore. So this is the broader breakup of the 11.11 lakh crore, out of which roads, railways, defense, and allocation to finance ministry, which includes this category, transfer to state. So these are some of the bigger big ticket items in the capital expenditure. Next slide, please. Yeah, so what is happening is there are two trends that are being seen simultaneously. One is that the share of capital expenditure is consistently rising, but overall we see that there has been an expenditure compression. In other words, the size of budget is shrinking in terms of, if we compare the total expenditure as a percent to GDP, the size has been shrinking, and it's going to fall even further in the FY25. So two trends are visible here, as I said. One is that the total expenditure as a percent to GDP is falling. The revenue expenditure as a percent to GDP is declining sharply, and capital expenditure is rising as a share of GDP. So as per the revised estimates of the current year, CapEx is expected to be 3.2% of GDP, and next year it is 3.4% of GDP. So we are seeing that while capital expenditure growth is robust, but we are seeing that in terms of expenditure growth or overall expenditure growth and revenue expenditure growth, the targets have been quite modest. So this has been the strategy to achieve fiscal discipline, and at the same time continuing the thrust on capital expenditure. So the expenditure composition is very important, and looking at expenditure as a percentage of the size of the economy is critical from that standpoint. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the quality of expenditure is improving, and now capital expenditure accounts for almost more than 30% of the overall expenditure. So this is another important step that the government has taken, that consistently the quality of expenditure is shifting from revenue to capital expenditure. It's shifting to more productive investment, and now capital expenditure is accounting for more than 30% of the overall expenditure. Next slide, please. Now, so these are some of the major expenditure heads. This is just taken from the budget at a glance, but I would like you to focus only at this point in time on the expenditure growth targets and on the revenue expenditure growth targets. Okay, only the total expenditure and revenue expenditure. We'll get back to receipts in a bit. So here we want to focus on expenditure. So if you see that expenditure growth last year was 7%, and this year expenditure growth has been kept at 6%. So there is the growth of expenditure has been kept quite modest. Revenue expenditure growth is also projected at very nominal. It's just 3.2% over the revised estimates of the current financial year. So whatever growth we are expecting in expenditure side, if we look at the budget papers, we see that growth is coming, double-digit growth is expected, more than 17%. If we look at the effective capital expenditure. So what is effective capital expenditure? It is the capital expenditure plus the grants and aids to states for creation of capital assets. If we add these two items, we are seeing that growth is expected to be more than 17% over the revised estimates of the current financial year. So total expenditure growth.
May I request you to wind up quickly, please?
Yeah, just 3 minutes more, sir. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is just about subsidies, that what happened from the revenue expenditure side. The subsidies part is very important because last year we see that the government had to spend more on subsidies on all the three components of subsidy: fertilizer, fuel, as well as food subsidy. Because on food subsidy, the government increased extended the free food grain scheme, so that resulted in higher allocation on food subsidy from BE to RE. Fertilizer also, petroleum also, because government announced the extension and increased the subsidy on gas cylinders under the Ujjwala scheme, and also extended it. So we saw a big jump in petroleum subsidy. There was almost a more than 10,000 crore increase in petroleum subsidy. So from BE to RE, there was an increase, but the next financial year, again, it's expected to gradually decline from more than 4 lakh crore to 3.81 lakh crore in next year. Next slide, please. Yeah, receipts. I'll just briefly touch upon that before finishing my slideshow. Yeah, so a big question that people are asking is that whether the revenue projections are realistic or not. So this table is showing in level terms the revenue receipts, and if we see that, what happened, there are two elements that we should look at here. What is happening from B to RE of the current financial year, and then from RE to B of the next financial year. So what we are seeing here is that some of the taxes, particularly direct taxes, did very well in the current financial year. And from the non-tax revenue side, we saw that the government achieved hefty dividends from Reserve Bank of India and public sector banks that resulted in bigger non-tax revenues. Next slide, please. So these are in growth terms. We are seeing that both income tax and corporation tax growth is projected at 13%. And we think that these are quite reasonable. These are quite conservative, because if we look at from April to December of the current year, we are seeing that, these taxes are growing at a robust pace. There was 18 to 20% growth in income and corporation taxes. So we feel that the tax estimates are quite reasonable. On the non-tax revenue, the government again feels that it's going to get the same amount of dividends from RBI. That is something that needs to be seen, because dividends from RBI are based on the RBI's own provisioning policy and so on. But particularly if we focus on tax revenues, we see that the assumptions are quite reasonable, and if they are not, the government, if there's no major shock, the government would be able to achieve these targets. Next slide, please. So increase in non-tax revenue, growth in receipts. Net tax revenue is targeted to increase by 11.9%. Non-tax revenue as a percent to GDP has been increasing. It's now more than 1%. Modest growth in revenue expenditure and expenditure compression. We talked about this earlier. Next slide. So this is a very interesting slide. I just want to show you what led to the reduction from 5.9 to 5.8%. So this is just showing which factors, the broad categories of the budget at a glance, what factors led to the decline in fiscal deficit. So it's primarily the tax revenue as well as the non-tax revenue that led to decline in the fiscal deficit, whereas the non-debt creating capital receipts, which mainly includes disinvestment, the government could not achieve the target, and that resulted in an increase. So the red bars are showing those that contributed to an increase in deficit, and green bars are those that led to a reduction in deficit. Next slide. Same is for the current financial year, for the next financial year. What are the things that will lead to a reduction in deficit are shown in the green bars, and what could lead to deviation are shown in the red bars. So that's a very important way of looking at, in terms of percent to GDP, some of the broad bars. And with that, I will end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. The way you articulated such complex statistics has definitely deepened our understanding of the subject matter. Thank you so much for your valuable insights. Now, it is my honor to invite Professor A. Amartya Reddy ji to share his insights.
Thank you for inviting me. I am A. Amarendra Reddy. Actually, I will cover agriculture sector in the budget. If you see, there is a pattern since last 10 years. The pattern is earlier, 20 years back, if you go to villages, if you go to agricultural office, mandal or block level agricultural office, most of the times you used to see the inputs distribution like small cycles or small farm implements, something like that, farm machineries, sprayers, dusters, all these things agriculture officer used to distribute to the farmers. And it is through the public distribution, in public sector mostly. There is a minimal private sector participation. Private sector participation is there in some crops like cotton and other crops. But over the years, there is a significant shift towards DBT schemes. All because if any village, if you go to any village, there are some 30, 40 schemes are going actively running in the villages. These after these 30, 40 schemes, some are state government, some are central government, but all are moving towards DBT. So the role of district means block level agriculture officers are little bit reduced. They are mostly confining to the direct benefit transfer like PM Kisan, or in some other states like Andhra Pradesh or YSR YSR schemes, or Raitu Bima, Raitu Bandhu in Telangana, or even any other states, state government schemes also there, right? Direct benefit transfers, and central government scheme is anyway, it is there. So this backbone is again the technology. So DBT plus technology, Aadhaar based in bank linkages and all these things, land records, digitization of land records, they facilitated. Of course, they reduce that no leakages in the system. And simultaneously, private sectoring is coming up in a big way in most of the crops. But some crops, because private sector cannot go into all the crops, like for example, millets, pulses, oil seeds, or neglected areas, or dry lands, or rain-fed areas. These areas, these crops are not profitable to the private sector anyway. So that means both government and public sector as well as the private sector concentrated on big commercial crops like paddy, wheat, and cotton for their agriculture sector. And recently, government of India is also emphasizing on the farmers organization, farmer producer organizations in different forms, companies or cooperatives, whatever it is. But farmer producer organizations also coming up in a big way. But it's very nascent stage. We cannot say that they are very much successful. Again, in the recent years, Government of India is emphasizing on cooperatives, rejuvenation of SHGs, self-help groups, women self-help groups. There is a lot of activities going on in the women self-help groups. And a lot of rejuvenation is especially Maharashtra, some southern states, women self-help groups, they are marketing, they are exporting to different countries, they're producing very, very good products. So that is all these things are going on. One, the vibrant DBT and private sector plus cooperatives and technology, especially we are shifting from the traditional urea and NPK and nano technologies, nano urea, and this budget nano DAP, because they are more efficient. They can they can increase efficiency by 30-40%, sometimes even 200% also. Uh, these are all the some background. As on top of it, we are already having the credit agriculture credit big ticket government scheme like PM Kisan, Prime Minister Fasal Bima Yojana. Fasal Bima Yojana, because we have X. So what is the positives and negatives of this type of DBT plus private cooperative sector is DBT is working very well in some patches, very well in distributing benefits to the farmers and users. They are using very well, definitely. But for example, technologies are embedded in inputs like farm machinery, dusters, sprayers. Farmers need to have the technology background, technology knowledge, along with the dusters, and so many times farmers are not able to purchase or procure or hire this type of equipments in the recent years. That's why the crop diversification is slowed down. Mostly farmers are cultivating paddy or wheat, or where the public dominance is there, public sector is dominant, and they require very little knowledge. But knowledge intensive crops like some chilies or some other commercial crops, high value crops, but even pulses and all, they are highly knowledge intensive. So that farmers are moving towards paddy and wheat rather than these knowledge intensive crops. That is one. Again, in the recent years, APMCs historically they are highly politicized institutions, and their efficiency is reduced significantly over the years. And recently, this electronic national agricultural markets, one nation, one market, uh, that is expanding significantly. Most of the commodities, most of the states are adopting this scheme very well. This is in a federal structure, and it's going very well. And also, as we have mentioned already, in the technology front, the climate smart agriculture, like green solar power, wind power, even bioenergy, bioconstruction, this type of emphasis is taken in this budget. It's lot of emphasis on given in biomass, bioenergy, and solar energy, like rooftop, this type of things. And probably we have to wait and see what will be the results in the future, because these technologies are not standardized. Standard operating procedures are not yet developed. These are all in an experimental stage. Even ICR, Indian Council of Agriculture Research, they are not having. And another thing is that budget is somewhat very less on all these schemes, maybe 200 crores, 300 crores, 500 crores. Probably, I think how we can go about is we have to see. This year, what we have found again, this market intervention scheme. Market intervention, the procurement of, it is not paddy and wheat procurement, market intervention of pulses and oilseeds, that they have not given budget. Another thing is that distribution of pulses, they have not given approach, no budget. So that way, probably crop diversification has given some little emphasis when compared to the requirement. However, the government of India mentioned it, oil seeds promotion, and also dairy promotion, and fisheries promotion through food processing industry. So these are all some positives and negatives are there in this budget. Mm, this the again one another important thing is that historically in the agriculture sector the private investment is not coming up. That's why government thought that we have to introduce this new form laws through liberalization of the markets, private entry of private sector, direct marketing by the farmers, and all these things. So anyway, those acts are repealed. But this with the electronic national agriculture markets, even with the startups, government of India enhanced the accelerated agricultural accelerated fund for pushing up the startups, and also via MSME, priority for MSME, and also this viability gap funding, for R&D. Those type of things maybe push for this new taking up of new technologies, innovative technologies, even climate smart technologies like bioenergy, bioconstruction, or solar and wind energy. So these are all there. But ultimately, our objective of doubling farmers' income, because in the recent survey also, the farmers' incomes are just 10,000 rupees per household per monthly income. So how we can increase incomes? That is the main priority of the government. Government put a long-term goal of doubling farmers' income in 5 years. Of course, we are not able to achieve it. But in the rural sector, if you take it overall, agriculture's crop sector alone, we cannot increase farmers' income. Farmers are getting only 40% of their income, household income, from agriculture. Remaining 60% they are getting from different sources like business, petty business, or agricultural laborers, or construction laborers, or any other non-agricultural venues. So this, in the to grow the rural sector, we have to enhance the vibrancy at village level, at block level, through through different institutional innovations like farmer producer organizations, startups, and all these things to make more vibrant. But thing is that unless we have balanced public investment along with the private investment, we cannot achieve that target what we have mentioned in our government documents. So this is, and also very importantly, we need innovative local innovations. For example, recently I have visited 3 states. One is in Karnataka, other is Andhra Pradesh, another one is Telangana. Field visits to see the efficiency of different government schemes running in the village level, especially Prime Minister Fasal Bima Yojana or crop insurance schemes. And what I have seen is village level institutions are very, very important to reach the benefits. So out of some 30, 40 schemes, government schemes running, most of the schemes are reaching to the end users in Andhra Pradesh. Same schemes, but reach and use of these schemes by the poorest of the poor sections are much higher in Andhra Pradesh. The single reason is that they have constructed an innovative approach like village secretariat, and Raitu Bharosa Kendras, wherein in each village, every farmer is enrolled in the electronic cropping system, which crop they have used, what is the land area, and all these things. So as soon as crop loss is reported in that particular village, and every farmer in that particular village will be paid claims without any delay. So that database is there now, the land records are there, that electronic systems are there, the efficiency increased very much. Not only the Prime Minister Fasal Bima Yojana, all other schemes, the reachability, reaching to the end users are much higher in this type of through this Raitu Bharosa Kendras and the village secretariats. So that type of okay, I'm stopped. Anything?
Thank you.
So
Thank-
I will come back for a question answer session. I think I'm stopping here.
Thank you so much, sir. Your insights have been truly enlightening, and we truly are privileged to have had the opportunity to benefit from your expertise. Thank you so much, sir. Now, I am thrilled to extend a warm welcome to Professor Prabir Teji to further broaden our understanding.
Good. Thank you very much. I think I'm audible. Well, first of all, I thank organizer IMPRI for the invitation, and also I'd like to thank Professor Mukul sir for sharing the session and opening remarks, and all other my co-panelists. I think I can't see. Yeah, now I can see it. But now, see, I mean, what I'm going to do for the next 8 minutes, that's the time allotted. This is as an interim budget. We should not link many things in the budget. We should not have more expectations as well on that. Look, this election year, the budget moves into a very expected path and didn't disappoint. So I go by Professor Asser that the budget objective is to take India into Vikashit Bharat 2047. 2047, by when India is expected to be a developed country. And this is a step, the budget, so one of it. After election, there will be full budget, and I'm sure the intent will be maintained. Now, the quote the finance minister, rightly said that Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Viswas, and then she added Sabka Prayas, that everybody has to make a big effort to reach to the developed India 2047. That's up. And the budget, I found many of the numbers, the intent, and the overall programs of the government. It's a more people-centric, inclusive development. Like, I like this Garib Kalyan, Desh Ka Kalyan, kind of thing. The budget is people, the findings of the people. As I said, this is an interim budget. We should not be expecting more of it. Let me come to the part which is allotted to me. Talk about more about the islands. Is there any allotment? Is there anything new done by the budget for the island developments like Lakshadweep. Maldives and Lakshadweep both are very much in the headlines, and I will restrict myself on the island development part of the budget, and the strategy for the Amrit Kaal. The budget, Prime Finance Minister says had 5 strategies, if I'm correct. But first of all, the analysis I did, quick, number crunching, which is that that the External Affairs Ministry, in short, MEA, we have been telling that you have so many responsibilities, asking India to play globally, but the budget allotted to the MEA is less than 1%. So this is 2024-25. The budget estimate says that it is simply, it's interim, but the number there's a decline in terms of between 2023-24 revised estimate and 2024-25 budget estimate. So it says that maybe the MEA perhaps not in the interest of the government in this election year. So which are the ministries, top 10, starting with the Ministry of Defense? The first, Dr. Pandey, she eloquently discussed all of them. And then coming in, the MEA doesn't come in the top 10. That's what the point I would like. So MEA's assistance to some of the neighboring countries in the neighborhood, which is very much interest. We have both economic and strategic decline, but again, we don't need to see the numbers so very much, neither we need to draw much conclusions, because these numbers comes with the last 2 doubles, 0. That means 100, 200, 300, 400. And we know that these numbers are just made it like this, So Bhutan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, some of the countries in the Central Asia, etc., African countries, their allotments are small, and also declined compared to the last year. But as I said, that I should not look at much in it. It will come, it will be revised again when this government going to put in, the final budget after the elections. Second point is, which is very encouraging, it's an FDI. 2014-2023 total accumulated FDI numbers quoted by the finance ministers, $596 billion, and which is the twice now of 2005 to 2014. So it means that there is a high, interest in the country, confidence, both from the foreign investors and the government. And I have seen it, in the numbers. That's the way it is. And in the budget, I see, there is a discussion about putting in, signing up bilateral investment treaties and etc. So MEA, which is the Ministry for External Relations, and where we see their allotment has even decreased. Again, it is the budget estimate. And as well as we see this encouraging part is in the FDI, which is there is an intention that we need to go and do more about a signing investment agreement, and in the spirit of first developed India. Let me come to that island development on the Lakshadweep in particular. And as we have seen that, tourism infrastructure, and also the connecting the back-end infrastructure like port connectivity, coastal development, like, they get finance ministers repeatedly said in our budget that, in the budget that, 2 things, that the development of the islands, and because it's going to create more employment. Lakshadweep, the India's tourist interest, from Maldives to Lakshadweep, there is a point, So it's a quite interesting decision that they have taken, and I appreciate and I thank them. Many of us, we don't get an opportunity to travel to, Lakshadweep, but certainly this is going to add more travel and tourism opportunity, hospitality, and the mice, particularly in the island. But there are downsides, by the way. Small islands, lots of crowd, if they go, there are many downsides. We need to be very careful. Now, there is, I think, the point that this is an interim budget. Actual budget is likely to be in July. So I hope the finance ministry will retain the intent that they have announced in the interim budget, and certainly that I expect that they should be looking at our interest in the final budget. But what's actually motivated them to look at island development, the budget for the first time? Because I was told that this is the G20 summit. During the G20 summit, there are many events organized as a part of the G20 summit last year, and government was very happy in terms of its arrangements going into these places, the remote places, which could actually generate more inclusive development. Now, along with the island development, there are three things which I found there are international implications. One is the port connectivity, the corridors that the finance ministers talked about, the railway corridors, particularly the railway corridors for the energy, mineral, and cement corridors, port connectivity corridors, and the high traffic density corridors. These three things, very well thought plan, and certainly going to reduce the logistics cost. It's a part of the PM Gati Shakti multimodal connectivity programs. And the one which Dr. Pandey has also said that, Vande Bharat has created a domino effect that everyone would like to expect that Vande Bharat kind of thing. So in the budget, it was announced that 40,000 and the normal railway, the bogies, which travel if you be part of the Bihar and the UP and Madhya Pradesh, or West Bengal or Odisha, you'll see those kind of, very old compartments, railway compartments. This time I found that there's an honest attempt to convert those railway compartments. Those who travel, ordinary people like me, ordinary people like a farmer, they travel in those compartments. So those are going to be elevated to Vande Bharat standards. So these are quite interesting announcements, like the schemes in the aviation sector. I found new aircraft for airlines and airports, infrastructure. All of them are somehow they are they got in place in the budget. So to conclude, and obviously if we have an added interest, that's what I seen in the budget, that if you have a railway corridor, road corridor, highway corridor, capital expenditure, certainly is going to pick up the mode. And that's a presentation by Dr. Pandey. She said very 3.5%, if I'm correct, GDP is there's a sharp increase. 2022-23 budget, 2.5% of the GDP is going to the capex. This time it is 3.4%. So I think I conclude, thanking the government and for putting it an excellent budget. Even if it is an interim, it is going to have no less than impact for the full budget if we had it that place. And personally, I'm very happy because my sister works as an ASA worker in a village in West Bengal. This time I found the finance minister has added allotments for the ASA workers, Anganwadi workers. So I thank her. And before budget, don't forget that government made an effort to correct the customs anomalies in the production chains for mobile phone. That some of the parts and components are required to assemble mobile phone, like Apple iPhone 15 or Samsung or any others. There were a 15% customs duty, whereas importing the full mobile phone is almost a zero tariff. 5% of zero tariff. So we were talking about inverted duty structure, which is not actually supporting our production chains and value chains. So just before budget, one day before budget, this anomalies in the stack structure, customs duties, the parts and components import has been rationalized. So for two counts, I thank government to encouraging more about production links with our countries in Southeast and East Asia, as well as going down to very people who are actually dealing with human people-to-people relations, like ASA worker or Anganwadi workers. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for shedding light on the intricacies of island development within the budget. It was truly fascinating to delve into such an important and often overlooked facet of economic planning. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your insights. Um, Now, it is my honor and privilege to call upon Mr. Shubhamoy Bhattacharya ji. We welcome you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Arjun, and thank you, Professor Asher, and thank you, Prabir, and thank you, Professor Radhika Pandey and Dr. Professor Reddy. You know, it's been a delight to listen this evening and just sort of refresh lots of my thoughts. It's been, in fact, last year also. I remember when we were talking. I remember discussing that, you know, the budgets is best understood when it's given a bit of a time to sort of show, read up. It's not something that you can do immediately. Unfortunately, we in the newspapers have a sort of, I mean, we are supposed to immediately come up with our reactions in the budget. And by next morning, in fact, nowadays, thanks to the digital economy, by in a couple of hours, we are there and we are on the air and we are talking about what's happened in the budget. And to my sense, what happens is that in the rush to cover everything, we end up possibly trivializing the budget. Also, we end up taking away the time and the space that is required, that is often necessary to understand a document which is as important as a country's budget, even more made important by the fact that we are talking about one of the 5th largest economies of the world. And that economy's budget, to be understood, needs a bit of parsing. That parsing possibly gets slightly distracted. This is important to point out because often budget commentaries that come along usually get dominated by the first impressions on the very first day. Having tracked budgets over several decades, I can tell you what happens is that the first impressions that come through on the first day tends to be the dominant narrative. And this is something that, despite efforts later on, tends to be the overall understanding. So when there is a discussion with the finance ministry, there's a discussion in the parliament, there's a discussion in various forums, including a very significant forum that happens every year, which is the 5 Institutes meeting. This 5 Institutes meeting typically happens about the first Saturday, usually after the budget. I'm sure you would have heard about it, but if you haven't, let me just tell you. This is the 5, the CPR, the IMPRI, the NIPFP, Professor Pandey is part of it, and IDF and NCR, who come together to sort of examine the budget. There is often, despite the fact that it's a very significant meeting where probably India's largest, I would say, at any stage, a group of economists come together to discuss the budget. Still, I have seen that often the themes get dominated by what is being discussed on the first day. So it's like first day, first show. This is something that we would need to be a bit careful about, because the India government budget is now becoming a very significant document that needs to be understood in its entirety. I'll tell you why. This time, for instance, in the run-up to the budget, and I'm talking about, and why I'm saying this is because a budget, after all, is a political document. It is not just a statement of the economy's facts and figures. This is it is the document written by the party in power about what it wants to do in the year ahead. It is not meant to be a document which is simply stating the expenditure and income for the year ahead. If that was so that it could have just been tabled in the parliament without any need for discussion. The very fact that the prime minister, that the finance minister comes on record and does a speech is because it is a political document. Remember, the budget speech is not technically a part of the budget. In other words, the Constitution of India, the relevant provision of the Constitution, does not say anything about a budget speech. It says that the budget will be a statement of the expenditure and of the government of India and the income that the government of India wants to raise from the parliament. The budget speech is, however, regarded as the statement, as the most significant entity there because it is a political document. Finance ministers recognize it, the parties in power recognize it, that this is a document where the party in power lays out its priorities. And as I said, the politicalness of that power, of that speech, the politicalness of what is said immediately thereafter by the commentators often therefore takes an inordinate space in the minds, in the discussions and understanding of the budget. So therefore, this is something that we need to understand. At this context, let me also point out, there is no provision in the Constitution which says that there will be an interim budget. The word interim budget doesn't appear in the Constitution. It just simply says that the government will be stating a recording of the expenditure and income. So the interim budget, because typically what happens is in a 5-year period, the government has 5 budgets to present before the parliament, and the 5 budget gets over. The interim budget is the additionality which the government brings in to record it as a political statement. This is something that needs to be understood. This is what gives the budget speech its salience. And this is where commentaries, which I talked about by the commentators on the day of the budget, becomes very significant because it actually makes for the understanding or how the budget is interpreted. Once this is understood, then it becomes clear to see where a finance minister or why a finance minister would be making a particular position in the budget. So what happened in this budget? In this budget, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman knew that she did not have the space to write out policies on taxes, because obviously those policies on taxes will not be valid unless a new government comes in, and these can only be statements of intentions. What she therefore did was she instead talked about the expenditure. Remember here also something very important. Ms. Sitharaman in the last interim budget that was presented, presented before the election of 2019, the government said that this is a full budget. Why am I raising these issues? Because this is important to understand that the budget speech or the budget document is never written without a clear political purpose. And the clear political purpose is that last time the government needed to make it clear that this was a full budget, even though it wasn't. This time, the government, being in a much better financial position, did not need to make that assertion. It was comfortable in the current economic condition to make the state to follow with a more conservative approach to the government, to the numbers of to the government finances. So, as I said, these contexts make it very significant how a budget is created and structured. And these considerations come in very, very significantly in understanding what the budget's central message will be. So what was the central message of this budget? Just as last time, the central message of the budget was that this is a government that is working, there's lots of plans that it has, it laid out a series of measures that it seeks to do once it is back in power. This time, the government wanted to make out just one number. What was that number? That was the number on fiscal deficit. Why was it so? Because this year, as Dr. Pandey pointed out, we are entering the global bonds market. International investment in the Indian economy would be very significant on what amount of stability the government can show in terms of management of its finances. Among the four macro numbers, inflation, current account deficit, the current account deficit, the macroeconomy, and the interest rate, the fiscal deficit and the interest rate, it is only the fiscal deficit in India which is considered the Achilles heel. This has been holding up its rating. This is the one which the government has been rating continuously as something that it is working hard on. And therefore, Ms. Sitharaman was not going to leave any option, any chance not to flag that particular thing. Which is why she said that the fiscal deficit was being improved upon in this current year. And she also went out to say that next year it will be 5.1%. And also, for good measure, she said that we are sticking to the fiscal management plans to make it to come closer to 4.5% by the year 25-26. This set of numbers for her was the most significant number. And once having said that, the reason I'm saying it is because this number was actually the number which was penciled in before the other income and expenditure numbers were penciled in. So, for instance, there is a discussion about whether the capex at the peculiar number of 11 lakh crore, 11.1111, that number was simply something which was part of I would say, estimate that has been created based on what the fiscal deficit should be. It's neither higher nor lower. It's simply what was needed to make the fiscal deficit be at 5.8%. In other words, instead of the income and expenditure being framed, being calculated, and then from that, the derivative, the fiscal deficit coming along, it was the reverse. And this was necessary because this was an interim budget where the government had to show to the world that this is where we stand. It's a very significant piece of, as I said, mixture of political and economic statements, but it comes along because this is what was the intention. And that is why you find that that is the most that once that number is taken out, the rest of the budget is frankly just a statement of intentions of what the government would be doing. Those intentions, as some of you did point out, would be working depending on how the government looks at its performance in the election, and would be further be going along to it. For instance, as Dr. Mukul would know, there's been a lot of discussion about the new pension system. But this budget, if it had been interested, they would have pointed out that this pension system, that the government stands firm on the new pension system. But this is an election time. While the government is definitely firm on the election system, it doesn't want to say something which is definitely not something that you would want to raise as an issue in an election. Of course, the initial trends and others do show that possibly this government is going to come back. But even then, a smart government will not like to say that we are going out on a limb on the new pension system, that this is the system that we shall be swearing by. There's a time and a space for announcing those things sometimes later, but not now. So this is what the structure of the budget is. And from this budget, I would take on one more data point, which is that this budget has created another number, or rather the space for another number, which is possibly of more significance and salience to the economy, at least to the lower income group. And what is that? It is the RBI interest rates, what the RBI sets as the repo rate. RBI meeting will be happening very soon. And in that meeting, the fact that the government has been able to keep to its fiscal deficit, and it has been able to also point out how strongly committed it is to the future interest, to the future direction of the fiscal deficit, is a very significant piece of policy statement for the RBI to be able to take a measured position on the interest rates. Because the budget and the interest rate that comes, the setting of the interest rate that by RBI that comes very shortly thereafter, are both extremely twinned together, and both need to be read together to get a sense of what the entire what the nature of the budget is. So all after having done these connections, or these connecting these dots, you then realize that the rest of the budget picture falls into place. For instance, what will be done on the health sector? What will be done on the education sector? What will be done on disinvestment? What will be the plans for sectors like agriculture? Are all a derivative of this particular picture that has been drawn. That's a political picture, and this political picture is based on a particular message. I mean, stands on a particular political message, which is that the fiscal deficit will be kept at a particular position. If one wants to look at the interim budget, then there is no number which is of more salience than this particular statistic. Does this statistic look good? There is a question mark here, because this statistic is built on a particular estimate of the GDP. Is the GDP figure looking stable enough? Is it looking good enough at the nominal GDP I'm talking about to be able to give this fiscal deficit? That is where the debate has to be. It then brings me back to the point which I started out with, that the first day's show on the budget often tends to miss out these nuances And it's very good that IMPRI has been has taken the initiative to have this particular discussion. It will be good in the subsequent discussion that we're having if this perspective is understood and made the basis for our understanding of the interim budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Your insights and perspectives were very captivating, making the discussion even more engaging for all of us. And I believe I speak on behalf of everyone when I say that it was truly a privilege to have learned so much from you. Thank you so much, sir. Now, I'm delighted to invite Professor Mukul Asherji for the chair's closing remarks and discussion. Over to you, sir.
Do we have any Q&A? No. No questions and no questions from anyone?
Sir, I believe there is one question. I'll just read the question out, sir. Professor Amarendra Reddy ji, you have mentioned that in AP, the delivery of services, agricultural inputs is more effective than the other two states, Karnataka and Telangana, because of the institutional structure at the grassroots, mainly the secretariat setup. What about the village gram panchayats and taluk panchayats in Karnataka? Your point is that village secretariat in AP is more efficient rather than PRIs in Karnataka.
So I just, within 2 minutes, I will clarify. In Andhra Pradesh, there is each village is having village secretariats and also Raitu Bharosa Kendra side by side, adjacent. And another, each village secretariat are having some village volunteers, wherein for each 50 households, one volunteer will be there. 50 households, one volunteer, and he will list out the household details, and he will compare which are the schemes they are eligible for, and most of the schemes there is a door delivery. For example, even pension. Even 31st of that previous month they are getting pension, every old age pension or disability pension, everything. So that is the structure they built in at village level. Into Karnataka, even other states also, somehow the local governance systems are not that perfect. Maybe of course in the side in Andhra Pradesh, there is a suppression of democratic forces at grassroots level with this, village secretariat is in place with, lot of officers and all. But as on today, it's working very well for the end user. Every eligible household, they are getting all the benefits. In case of Karnataka, we saw, I think most of the schemes, really, they have not gone to the end users. There is some politics. If, for example, Prime Minister Fasal Bima Yojana, I saw some 10 villages, there is a crop damage. But in particular, 1 or 2 villages, wherever the political activity is there, in those villages, some proactive political leaders, with their proactiveness, they benefited their own village people. Otherwise, the benefits are not reaching to the most of the lost farmers. So that is my take.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
No, sir.
No. May I suggest that the 2 minutes, if each of the speaker want to make some final points, and then I'll follow up with 2-3 minutes myself. Okay, so let's start in the reverse order. Whoever spoke last, we go that way this time. So, Mr. Bhattacharya, any quick?
I mean, I think I'm fine. I think I'm fine. I was just saying that this budget was very limited in terms of what it wanted to say, and it had a very clear point that it wanted to say. this point was that it was about seeing what the fiscal deficit numbers are. It was about seeing that the macroeconomy of inflation, current account deficit, and the interest rates, the other three things, are all in position. And that was the central message of this budget, which has been taken on board by the global investors also. And that is what you'll be seeing in the subsequent months. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Professor Day.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I have nothing to add, but just a way to conclusion in 2 minutes. I thank the finance minister, the government, for presenting an excellent. I use the word just simply, excellent budget. Even though it's interim, it's going to have no less impact than a full budget. Government coming in July, they should maintain, and I mean, this is my to say that it's going to maintain the intent which is there in the budget, that Garib Kalyan, Desh Ka Kalyan, and the strategy for the Amrit Kal. Now, numbers are certainly going to change from when the full budget is presented in coming July, but I'm sure the budget, the main objectives which I picked up from reading the finance minister's statement is that the two aspects. One is the island development. This is very new, and connecting with the island development, port, the railway corridors, elevating the railway compartments, ordinary compartments, so the ordinary people like me and others that travel, getting elevated to a Vande Bharat type. The people who are working in the grassroots, in the real India, the ASA, Anganwadi worker, the Lakpati Didi scheme, and all of them are really well thought plan. I expect they continue in the full budget when it's presented. Last but not the least, the budget and the measures, for the governments to function with a certain objective. But if you look at Professor Asari, the last time in the union budget, you also had this similar discussion in the Zoom. I said something, and I stick to it, and I continue to tell it. Even though it has no strong connection, but very thin relation between the budget and the way we look at our Indian, the state level. Every states, they are having their own plans and programs. If the states are aligned with the governments running in the center, we call them a double engine government. They're doing well. But Professor Asar, you are an eminent scholar, eminent professor. If you look at from Delhi towards the south, and if you put a straight line, you will find states like Delhi, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu. They are the super, super rich states. And on the other hand, your left side, the states in Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, some part of the Uttar Pradesh, which are not adjacent to Delhi, some part of the real Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Himachal, Jammu and Kashmir, West Bengal, northeastern states, Orissa, they are falling behind. Far gap between them certainly is not going to be managed or mitigated by the budget, be it the interim and full. But this is the real challenge, whomsoever come in the government, after the elections, to narrow the gap between the richer states and between the laggard states. If we don't do, with the serious measures, be it a finance commission and other things, people living in the real India, they will have very less interest on the discussion on the union budget. And then what we will be doing, we will be restricting, think tanks and the people living in Delhi and the journalists and media more and more interest in the budget. So we see, kind of things, which is again my views. So thank you very much to you and IMPRI for picking up very interesting points, a very interesting subject to discuss post-budget. Thank you very much, sir.
Professor Reddy?
Yes, actually that, Subhav, my Bhattacharya ji, what he mentioned is fiscal consolidation is the primary focus of this budget. It's really what after seeing I'm seeing the numbers. Really, probably that is the main focus, because most of the schemes in agriculture sector, especially I gone through, they are the focus is probably on fiscal consolidation. So that really I saw, that's really very insightful talk. Again, the intent of the budget in agriculture sector, especially the promoting the new technologies like nanotechnology, nano urea, DAP, or even climate friendly technologies, keeping the global commitments like solar and wind energy, and also promoting some innovative ecosystem like startups, drones, this type of things. Another thing is that women self-help groups. Now, almost in India, almost every 2 villages, women self-help group is there. So that is probably that is the future growth engines for the villages. They have, I know, they are giving a lot of emphasis on women self-help groups and cooperatives. Another thing is that demand-driven or market-driven growth within the agriculture sector, like high-value crops, fruits and vegetables, dairy, fisheries, where the demand growth is much higher and export opportunity is also much higher. Again, this to focus on market-driven economies, or reforming the APMC markets, mandis, village mandis or block level mandis, through technology as well as institutional innovations like electronic national agriculture markets, or government priorities, and also food processing industries. Because in India, the process share of processed food is very much less than 2 or 5-6%, when compared to other developed countries, which is about 30, 40, 50%. So that is the priority of government of India in agriculture sector. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Pandey?
Yes, so I think the overarching theme, as we all are agreeing to, is the fact that fiscal consolidation is the main focus of the budget. The other thing is boosting capital expenditure on the premise that private investment is picking up, and therefore the rate of increase of capital expenditure is not that high as last year. Now, that is what is to be seen in the course of the year. What happens to the state of private investment? Does private investment picks up? Because the budgetary recommendations need to be seen in the context of the overall economy, as well as amidst the global challenges. So one is whether private investment picks up in a sustained manner, so that the need for government capex to continue to prime the economy recedes. That is number one. And second, what happens to consumption? Because there were these expectations that something could be done for boosting consumption, given that the recent GDP numbers showed that consumption is growing at a very anemic pace, just 4.4% growth that we saw as per the advanced estimates. So consumption and private investment are the two challenges that the economy is facing amid given that it's a fast-growing economy, but these are the two challenges. So that needs to be seen how we see. But overall, if we see the budget is quite strong on fiscal consolidation, and that is in a way it is good. It is pro-poor, because if fiscal deficit is high, then what happens is that our interest payments will rise, and interest payment as a share of overall revenue receipts will increase. So the scope for other productive investments or capital investment gets squeezed out. So to that extent, it is good. We need to see if there are some global headwinds or shocks, then maybe the allocation towards subsidy could have to be increased, and therefore fiscal consolidation may take a back seat. And overall, ultimately, we have to adhere to the FRBM target of 3% of GDP as a fiscal deficit. So that is something that needs to be seen, that once the white paper comes out, which the finance minister spoke about, What is the long-term strategy towards achieving the FRBM target of 3% of GDP and the debt to GDP ratio of 60%? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Since it is past 10 o'clock and we need to wind up, I will make 3 very quick points. The first point is that while budget time, interim or otherwise, focuses our mind on fiscal, economic policies, these throughout, and one should not wait until budget time. We have to analyze them simultaneously with what's happening throughout the year. The second point is that while the central government budget gets a lot of attention, the equivalent attention for state budgets is not provided. I think part of it is that the research resources are to analyze the state budgets and even the municipal budgets are simply not being devoted. And most of the think tanks focus on central and not on the state. And that needs to be addressed as we go along. I hope the Finance Commission, 16th Finance Commission, will help in giving greater importance to state and rural and urban bodies. The third is that we need to recognize that this government, this finance minister, deserves high level of commendation for making the budget figures more credible, bringing a lot of out of budget items back into the budget, making them transparent and realistic. And a point was raised about how realistic is the nominal GDP estimate. One indirect indicator is that the IMF has just said that they are projecting real GDP growth of 6.5% for 24-25 and 25-26 for India. So if you add around 4% or so the inflation rate, then the nominal GDP increase of 5% is actually very conservative and very believable, at least to me. Thank you. And thank you all for such a rich discussion and participation. Thank you, IMPRI again. Pranam.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
As we come to an end of today's discussion, I, Reetlath, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks. On behalf of IMPRI Center for the Study of Finance and Economics, I would like to thank you all for attending today's deliberation, a panel discussion on New India's economic transformation and interim budget, Union Budget 2024 to 2025. We are grateful to our chair for the session, Professor Mukul Asherji, and our esteemed panelists, Professor Amarinder Reddy ji, Dr. Radhika Pandey ji, Professor Prabir De ji, and Mr. Sumoy Bhattacharya ji, for taking their valuable time and giving us an opportunity to learn from this online panel discussion. We thank all our participants who have actively participated in today's deliberation, and we are grateful if you're watching us later on our YouTube channel or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. You may also find more thematic events and book discussions under IMPRI Web Policy Talk series. We hope you continue to join in to our future IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning. Wishing you a very good evening. Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.